In the last tutorial, we looked at visibility modifiers and we set all of our properties to private. But what if we wanted to access those properties or modify them? Well, that's where getters and setters come into play. Getters and setters are just the public methods that either modify or retrieve a property. With setters, we can use checks to make sure that the data that's submitted is actually valid. For example, we can have a year property inside one of our classes, and we can check with our setter to make sure that the year is not a negative number and that, for example, it's within a reasonable range. We can also either return a property value or some variation of it. So let's say that for the property is turned on, we store the values 1 or 0 for the on or off. We don't have to return 0 or 1, but can instead return a string, for example, on or off, with the help of an if statement. So let's jump into the code and look at a couple of examples. We actually already saw a getter in action inside our German Shepherd class, and that was the get eye color. As a matter of fact, it actually followed the getter naming convention, which you start off with the get followed by the property that you want to get. Most of the time, you're just going to return that property. But there are times, like for example in here, where we don't want to return either true or false. We want to return yes or no. So technically these are two getters. What we're going to do is we're going to rename this one to get does shed. And we can look up here and we can grab most of these properties with our getter. Well, actually all of our properties. By convention, the getters are usually placed right after your construct. So we'll go ahead and place all of our getters here. And as a matter of fact, if you have PHP Storm, I'll go ahead and remove these two getter methods. And then I'll go into code, I believe it is, generate. And then right here it says getters and setters. So right here I can select for which property I want to generate a getter and a setter for. So I'm just going to hold down shift on, for example here, shift and then click on fur color, click OK, and I can see right here that all of my getters and setters have been generated. If you guys don't have it, then you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. Now, PHP Storm is smart enough to actually include these PHP doc comments. So it's saying, hey, we're returning a string, and it's also specifying that a string is being returned here. So there's the get eye color. Set eye color is following pretty much the same kind of convention, with the exception that with every setter, you're going to be accepting a parameter or an argument. It's not going to be returning anything, so we're actually just going to be returning void or specifying that void will be returned. So you might have seen that in Java, for example, with public static void or public void. This is the same kind of concept right here. And all it does is it takes the argument that's passed and assigns it to a specific property like eye color. And we can go all the way down. So there's the get date of birth, set date of birth, is does shed. That's the way they named it. And is primarily just because it is a boolean. We can modify this if we want, or we can just leave it as is. For right now, I think I'm just going to leave it as is. And then we have set does shed, and it's going to be accepting a boolean value. And then that boolean value is going to be assigned to our does shed property. So if we keep going down, we can see that we can do all of these. Now, some of these we may not want to change, like species, subspecies, breed. So what I'm going to do is actually remove all of these. I shouldn't have selected them, but I just wanted to actually show you that it will generate if you want it to. So we'll go all the way up and remove all of these getters and setters. So the only other one that we have is get fur color and set fur color. Our other methods are still intact. The walk, bark, sleep methods that we created, they're still there. So now we can go below our class and we can actually instantiate the object. So I did that right here. GSDog is equal to new German Shepherd, and we can actually call one of our getters. So get date of birth, get eye color, get fur color. And since it's returning a string, what we could say is echo get eye color. If we open this up in the browser, there it is, brown, connection successfully established, connection successfully closed. That's for our car class that's being instantiated below. So all we wanted to see was this brown, and we actually ended up getting it. So now what we can do is we can actually set. So for example, let's say we set eye color to blue. So we're going to be passing a string, and then we can echo out gs dog get eye color again. Come back here, hit refresh, and there's brown followed by blue. Now we can do the same thing with our car class. Let's just make sure there aren't any typical getters or setters in here. Turn off drive, get car details. I think that's all good. So for the car, because it is more abstract, we're gonna wanna implement a getter and setter for each one of these properties. So once again, so I don't have to type everything out, I could use my IDE to generate all this stuff for me. So I can just go to code, generate getters and setters, and it's going to specify for the car class all the different properties. I'm going to highlight all of them, click OK, and as you can see by the side right here, all of these have been generated. Go all the way back up to the top. So there's the get color, it's going to return a string, and it's just going to return a color property. Set color is going to be accepting a string, and it's going to set the color property to the color argument that's passed. Get make, let's see, something different. Integer is going to be returned when you call the get year getter, and then you're also going to be passing an integer argument to the set year setter, and then assigning the year integer to the year property. Scrolling down, we can see a few more integers. There's strings. There's a floating point number that gets returned, the exterior height, as well as the floating point setter. And then since this method is not returning anything, it's just processing this set. It's actually, we specify explicitly that it's not returning anything with this void. If we keep going down, we can see strings and boolean. I guess that's the only other data type that we have in this class, which returns a boolean if you call isCarOn, or it passes a boolean as an argument when you call setCarOn method, and it just gets assigned to the car on property. So now we can go down here. We can say Chevy set horsepower, for example. And you can see right there, it's automatically popping up. HP needs to be an integer. And we can say, I don't know, 900 horsepower. And we can also say Chevy set torque. And we're going to have 1,000 foot-pounds of torque because we always want to have more torque than horsepower. And then we can echo out Chevy get horsepower and then Chevy get torque. So it's going to be all jumbled up together, but you'll get the point. We'll go over here, hit refresh, should be between these 2 points right here. So there it is, 900 and 1000, the two properties that we set, the horsepower and the torque. So I know I mentioned in the little introduction that we can do some checks. So this is what the beauty of a setter is. So we can say set year, and inside here we can specify if, for example, year is less than 0, let's just say echo not a valid year, and then we can just return so we don't actually set it. So now let's go down here, say Chevy set year, and we'll say -1. Now let's see what happens when we refresh. We get this echo statement, not a valid year. That's displayed. So a lot of the times you're going to want to do some kind of error reporting, some kind of big flashy error message, but in our case, all we returned was a string that said not a valid year. And that's really all there is to getters and setters. I mean, they're just methods that allow you to access private properties and to control certain input that the user may pass. Like, for example, if we don't want negative numbers to the year, we can eliminate that.